My hands are shaking as I grip the steering wheel. The airport exit sign blurs in front of me. I can still see her. My grandma, standing at the curb, her small frame getting smaller and smaller in my rearview mirror. She was smiling. She was always smiling at me, even when I didn't deserve it. I take a deep breath, but it catches in my throat. It's been 6 months, and I still can't drive this road without my chest getting tight. I have to tell someone. I have to get this out. So I'm talking to you. Just you. Maybe if I say it all out loud, it'll finally feel real. Or maybe it'll just hurt more. I don't know anymore. My name is Kevin Brooks, and I left my grandma at the airport. It sounds so simple when I say it like that. Just a stupid mistake. But it wasn't. It was a series of small, selfish choices, and I made every single one of them. It started months before that day. My grandma, Helen, she'd been planning this trip to see her sister in Florida. It was a big deal. The first time she was flying since my grandpa Frank passed away. She talked about it constantly. She had this little countdown calendar on her fridge. She'd mark off each day with a bright red X. She packed her bag 2 weeks early, a small blue rolling suitcase. She showed me how she folded everything perfectly. She even baked. Of course she baked. Chocolate chip cookies, her famous ones. She put them in a Tupperware container with a little note for the flight attendants. A little sweetness for your journey. That was her, always thinking of others. I promised I'd drive her to the airport. O'Hare. It's a beast of a place. I told her I'd be there early. We'd get there 3 hours before her flight, just like you're supposed to. We'd have time for a coffee. She loved those overpriced airport lattes. But the morning of, I was elsewhere. My head was somewhere else. I was stressed about work. A project deadline was looming. My phone was buzzing nonstop. Emails, texts, Slack messages. The world was screaming for my attention, and I gave it. I gave it all of my attention. I was late leaving my apartment in Lincoln Park. The traffic on the Kennedy Expressway was a nightmare. Stop and go. I was tapping my fingers on the wheel, sighing loudly in the empty car. I called her. I'm running a little behind, Graham. I'll be there soon. My voice was tight, impatient. I pulled up to her building. She was already outside, waiting on the bench. Her blue suitcase next to her, her purse on her lap, her hands folded neatly. She looked so small, so ready. She didn't look mad. She never looked mad. She just stood up and waved, that same gentle smile on her face. I got out, threw her suitcase in the trunk. Sorry, Graham. Traffic's a beast. I gave her a quick, one-armed hug. I could smell her perfume. That soft floral scent she's worn forever. I helped her into the passenger seat, and that was it. We were off. The drive was quiet. Or it was quiet from her side. From my side, it was chaos. My phone was plugged in, lighting up every few seconds. I had one AirPod in, taking a call from my boss, mumbling, and sure, I'll look at that. I was nodding along, my mind already at my desk, already solving problems that suddenly felt so much more important than the woman sitting next to me. I glanced over at her a few times. She was just looking out the window, watching Chicago slide by. Her hands were in her lap. She wasn't on her phone. She was just present. I remember feeling a flicker of guilt. I should talk to her. I should ask her if she's excited. But my phone buzzed again, and the moment passed. We got to the departures curb. United Airlines. The place was a zoo. Cars honking. People hugging goodbye. Skycaps yelling for luggage. It was overwhelming. I put the car in park. Okay, Graham, this is you. I popped the trunk and got out. I pulled her suitcase out and set it on the curb. The whole time, my phone was in my hand. I was reading an email. I can't even remember what it was about now. Something utterly meaningless. She came around the car and stood next to her suitcase. She adjusted her coat. She looked up at me. Her eyes a little watery. Not from sadness, I don't think. From everything. The trip, the memory of my grandpa, the chaos of the airport. Well, she said, her voice soft. I guess this is it. Yeah, I said, my eyes flicking from her face to my phone screen and back. Have a great flight, okay? Text me when you land. She reached up and hugged me. It was a proper full hug. She held on for a second. I gave her a quick pat-on-the-back hug in return. My mind was already on merging back into traffic. I love you, Kevin, she whispered. Love you too, Graham, I said. It was automatic, rushed. I got back in the car. I gave her one last wave. She was standing there, one hand on her suitcase, the other raised, waving back, smiling that brave, beautiful smile. I checked my mirror, saw a gap in traffic, and pulled away. I didn't look back again. I merged onto the expressway, heading back into the city. The silence in the car was immediate. No more phone calls. My battery was in the red, 2%. I figured I'd just let it die. I was tired of the noise. A few minutes later, my screen went black. The phone shut down. No calls, no messages, no emails, no distractions. Just the hum of the tires on the pavement. Just my own thoughts. And for the first time all day, it was quiet. Truly quiet. I made it home. I walked into my empty apartment. I didn't plug my phone in right away. I just collapsed on the couch. I stared at the ceiling. I don't know how long I sat there. An hour, maybe, just enjoying the silence, the peace. I felt a weight lift. All my responsibilities were gone, just for a little while. Eventually, I got up. I needed to check my messages, see what I'd missed. I walked over to the counter, found my charger, and plugged the phone in. The screen lit up. A little Apple logo appeared. And then it happened. The notifications started popping up, one after another after another. A flood of them, a tidal wave. Voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. Text message, text message, text message. Missed call, missed call, missed call. My heart started to thump, a slow, heavy beat in my ears. Most of them were from my mom, then a few from my aunt, then one from my dad, then a number I didn't recognize with a 407 area code, Florida. My thumb hovered over the screen. I felt cold, a deep, sinking cold that started in my stomach and spread out to my fingers and toes. I tapped on my mom's first text message. The words were simple. They were just words on a screen, but they changed everything. Kevin, where are you? The airline called. Grandma never got on her flight. I just stood there, in my kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at those words. I left my grandma at the airport, and in that single moment, holding my stupid recharged phone, I froze. I keep wondering how many other people have moments like this. Moments that split your life into a before and an after. I look at my phone so differently now. Every notification feels like a warning. I'm trying to be better. I really am. But I still see her every time I close my eyes, standing at that curb, waiting, smiling. I wonder how far this story will reach. If anyone else knows this feeling, this specific kind of regret, comment below what city you're listening from, just so I know I'm not the only one sitting in the quiet, remembering. My thumb was still hovering over the screen. It felt like a foreign object, this little rectangle of glass and metal that had just detonated my world. The airline called. Grandma never got on her flight. The words weren't sinking in. They were just black text on a white background. My brain kept reading them, over and over, like a skipping record. Never got on her flight. Never got on. Never. My first thought wasn't panic. It was pure, simple confusion. A glitch. A mistake. Of course she got on her flight. I dropped her off. I saw her go inside. She had her ticket. She was early. This was a computer error. The airline mixed up the passenger list. That had to be it. I tapped on my mom's name to call her back. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. It rang once, then twice. On the third ring, she picked up. There was no hello. There was just a sound. A choked, ragged inhale. Then her voice, thin and stretched tight with a terror I had never heard before. "Kevin, where have you been?" "Mom, I just saw your text. What's going on? What do you mean she never got on the flight?" "She's gone, Kevin." Her voice broke on the last word. "She's missing." The cold in my stomach turned to ice. "Missing? What do you mean, missing?" "She's at the airport. She has to be at the airport." I was pacing now, my free hand running through my hair, pulling at it. The calm, logical part of my brain was gone, replaced by a rising, frantic static. The airline called us. They paged her. They paged Helen Brooks over and over. She never boarded. They held the plane for a few minutes, but she never showed up. They gave her seat away. My mom was talking fast, the words tumbling out between sobs. "We've been calling you for hours. We thought we didn't know what to think." I stopped pacing. I leaned against my kitchen counter, my legs feeling like water. "But I dropped her off. I saw her walk towards the doors." Even as I said it, the memory felt flimsy. I saw her walk towards the doors? Did I? Or did I just assume she did? I was looking at my phone. I was reading an email. I didn't actually watch her go inside. "Did you walk her in?" my mom asked, and her tone shifted. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, a dawning, horrible suspicion. "Kevin, did you walk her inside? To the check-in counter?" The silence on my end was my answer. It was a loud, screaming, guilty silence. I could hear her processing it on the other end of the line. The pieces were clicking into place for her, just as they were for me. "Oh my God, Kevin." Her voice was a whisper now, flat and hollow. "You just left her at the curb?" "It was chaotic, Mom. There were people everywhere. She had her suitcase. She knows how to travel." I was defending myself, my voice rising in pitch. But the defense was pathetic, even to my own ears. She was a 78-year-old woman who hadn't flown in over a decade, in one of the biggest, busiest airports in the world. "Her phone is going straight to voicemail," my mom said, ignoring my excuses. "We called the airport police. They're looking for her. Your dad and Aunt Carol are on their way to O'Hare right now. We need you to go back, now." "I'm going. I'm leaving right now." I was already grabbing my car keys from the bowl by the door. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, panicked drumbeat. "Kevin," my mom said, and she started crying again. Deep, wrenching sobs that made my own throat close up. "What did you do?" "What did you do?" She hung up. The dial tone buzzed in my ear. I stood there for a second, keys in hand, the weight of her question crushing me. What did I do? The drive back to O'Hare was a blur of red taillights and a screaming monologue in my head. I broke every speed limit, swerving through traffic, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Every minute felt like an hour. Where was she? Was she scared? Was she hurt? Did she fall? Was she confused, wandering through some endless terminal, looking for a gate that didn't exist anymore? I replayed the drop-off in my mind, but now I was looking for clues. The way she adjusted her coat, her watery eyes. I guess this is it. She was waiting for me to offer to walk her in. She was hoping I would. And I was too busy, too important, too distracted to hear the question she wasn't asking. I pulled up to the same departure's curb, this time throwing the car into park and jumping out, not even caring if I got a ticket. I ran inside, my eyes scanning the crowds. It was still a zoo, but now it felt sinister. Every face was a stranger. Every elderly woman made my heart leap, only to sink again when it wasn't her. I found an information desk, my breath coming in short gasps. "I'm looking for my grandmother," I stammered to the woman behind the counter. "Helen Brooks, she's missing. The police are looking for her." The woman typed on her computer, her face neutral. "I can see a report has been filed. You should go to the airport police office, down this concourse, to your left." I ran. My dress shoes slipped on the polished floor. I pushed through crowds of happy travelers, their laughter feeling like a personal insult. How could they be happy? My grandma was lost. The police office was a small, sterile room with fluorescent lights. My dad and Aunt Carol were already there. My dad was standing, his arms crossed, his face a mask of grim tension. My aunt was sitting in a plastic chair, crying quietly into a tissue. When my dad saw me, his eyes locked onto mine. There was no greeting, no "Are you okay?" There was just a look of profound disappointment, so heavy it felt physical. "The security footage," he said, his voice low and controlled. They pulled the security footage from the curb. A uniformed officer came out of a back room. He had a tablet in his hand. "Mr. Brooks, we found her. She's safe. She's in a medical office near gate B12. She's a little shaken up, but she's okay." The relief was so intense, my knees almost buckled. "Oh, thank God. Where was she? What happened?" The officer looked at the tablet, then back at me. His expression was unreadable. "The footage shows you dropping her off. She stood there with her suitcase for about 2 minutes after you drove away. She seemed disoriented. She started walking, but she went the wrong way. She went towards the parking garage instead of the terminal." He handed me the tablet. On the screen, in grainy black and white, was my grandma. She looked so small and fragile. He was watching my car drive away. I saw her shoulders slump. She just stood there, a statue in the river of moving people. Then she picked up her suitcase and started walking, her head down, disappearing into the wrong set of automatic doors. "She got turned around in the garage," the officer continued. "She has a flip phone, and the battery died. She eventually found a janitor, who brought her to airport assistance. She's been there for the last 4 hours, waiting for someone to come get her. 4 hours. She sat in a strange room for 4 hours, thinking we had forgotten her, thinking I had forgotten her. My aunt stood up, her face red and puffy. She kept telling them her grandson was coming. She was sure you'd just gone to park the car and would be right back." I couldn't speak. I just handed the tablet back to the officer, my hand trembling. My dad finally walked over to me. He didn't hug me. He didn't yell. He just put a hand on my shoulder, and his voice was thick with an emotion I couldn't name. "Let's go get your grandmother, Kevin." We walked in silence to the medical office. When the door opened, there she was, sitting in a chair, her blue suitcase at her feet, her purse on her lap. She looked up as we entered, and her face, it lit up. It wasn't anger, it wasn't fear. It was pure, unadulterated relief. "Kevin," she said, her voice cracking. "There you are. I knew you'd come back." She stood up and opened her arms for a hug. I walked into them, and this time I held on. I buried my face in her shoulder, inhaling that familiar floral perfume, and I cried. I cried for my selfishness, for my distraction, for the 4 hours she spent waiting, still believing in me. She just patted my back, the way she did when I was a little kid. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're here now. It's okay." But it wasn't okay. It would never be okay, because I learned a lesson in the most brutal way possible, that the most important things are not on a screen. They're standing right in front of you, waiting for you to just look up. And I failed that test. I failed her. I wonder if you've ever felt a regret so sharp it feels like a physical wound, like you'd give anything to relive just 5 minutes of your life, to do it over, to be better. Tell me what city you're in right now, just so I know this quiet shame isn't just mine to carry. My legs felt like they were made of rubber as I followed my dad and aunt down the concourse. The bright, artificial lights of the airport felt like an interrogation. Every sound, the rumble of a suitcase, the blare of a gate announcement made me flinch. I was trailing a few steps behind them, unable to look at my dad's back. His shoulders were set in a straight, angry line. He hadn't said another word to me. I kept seeing that grainy security footage in my mind. Her, just standing there, watching my car disappear into the traffic. The way her shoulders slumped. It was a small movement, but it screamed. It screamed of disappointment, of being an afterthought. I had reduced my grandmother, the woman who taught me how to tie my shoes, to a task on a to-do list. Drop off Graham. Check. We reached the medical office near gate B12. It was a small, quiet room, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. A nurse at a desk looked up and gave a small professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. She knew who we were. She'd probably been dealing with my grandma for hours. "She's right through there," the nurse said softly, nodding towards an open doorway. My dad went in first. My aunt followed, sniffling. I hovered in the doorway, my feet glued to the floor. I was afraid to go in, afraid to see the look in her eyes, the accusation, the hurt. But when I finally forced myself to look, what I saw shattered me completely. She was sitting in a padded chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her small blue suitcase was tucked right beside her, her purse on top of it, just like the officer said. She looked small, so much smaller than I remembered. And when she looked up and saw us, her face didn't crumple in anger or relief. It lit up. It was the same radiant, unconditional smile she'd given me 1,000 times before. When I graduated high school, when I got my first job, when I'd visit for Sunday dinner. "Kevin," she said, and her voice was a little hoarse, but it was full of warmth. "There you are. I knew you'd come back." There was no, "Where were you?" No, "What took you so long?" Just absolute, unwavering faith. She had sat in this sterile room for 4 hours, lost and confused, and her only thought was that I was coming for her. She stood up, a little unsteady, and opened her arms. I didn't hesitate this time. I crossed the room in 2 strides and fell into her hug. It wasn't the quick pat-on-the-back hug I'd given her at the curb. This was a real hug. I wrapped my arms around her and held on tight. Like if I let go, she might disappear. I buried my face in the soft wool of her cardigan. It smelled like her, like lavender and the faint, sweet scent of the sugar cookies she always baked. And I cried. I couldn't stop it. Deep, shuddering sobs that I didn't even try to hide. I cried for my selfishness, for every time I'd looked at my phone instead of her face, for the 4 hours she spent waiting, alone and probably terrified, yet still believing her grandson would show up. She didn't say anything. She just held me. She patted my back with her soft, papery hand, the same rhythm she used when I was 6 and had scraped my knee. "It's okay," she whispered into my ear, her voice calm and steady. "You're here now. It's okay." But it wasn't okay. Her forgiveness made it worse. It would have been easier if she'd been angry, if she'd yelled at me. I deserved that. I deserved her rage. But her quiet understanding, her immediate absolution, it felt like a punishment. It highlighted how utterly unworthy I was of it. My dad finally spoke. "Let's get you home." His voice was gentle with her, but when his eyes flicked to me over her shoulder, they were hard. The message was clear. "We will talk about this later." We got her things. The nurse gave us a small bag with some water and crackers they'd given her. My grandma held my arm as we walked back through the airport. She leaned on me a little. I could feel the slight weight of her, the trust in her grip. Every step felt like a penance. The car ride to my parents' house was silent. I drove, my grandma in the passenger seat, my dad in the back. She stared out the window at the darkening Chicago skyline. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't ask why my phone was dead. She just accepted it. When we got to the house, my mom was waiting on the porch. She ran down the steps and pulled my grandma into a crushing hug, crying and laughing at the same time. I stood by the car, watching them. I was an outsider in this reunion, the one who had caused the crisis. My mom looked at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted. She didn't say anything either. She just shook her head slightly and led my grandma inside. I stood there in the driveway for a long time. The cold night air bit at my skin. I could hear the faint sounds of their voices from inside the warm, lit house. I was supposed to go in, but I couldn't make my feet move. I had brought her home, but I had broken something. A trust. A fundamental understanding of my role in this family. I was the one who was supposed to be reliable. The one with the car, the phone, the plan. And I had failed. I got back in my car and just sat there, the engine off, staring at my dark house. The silence was back, but it wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy. It was full of the echo of my mom's sobs and the image of my grandma's slumped shoulders on that security tape. I had gotten a second chance. She was safe. She was home. But the cost of that lesson was a scar on my soul. I knew right then that I would never be able to drive past O'Hare again without feeling a physical jolt of shame. I would never hear my phone die without a spike of anxiety. I had been given a glimpse of a world where my inattention had permanent, tragic consequences, and I had to live with the knowledge that it was only by sheer dumb luck that I got to come here and tell you about it, instead of living with a loss I could never have forgiven myself for. That's the thing about moments like these. They don't just teach you a lesson. They rewire you. They change the person you are. The old Kevin, the one who thought a text message was more important than a goodbye, died in that airport. And this new version, he's trying to be better. But he's always looking over his shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop, wondering if he'll ever truly feel like he's earned that hug. If this story hit a nerve, if it made you think about your own grandma or a time you were too distracted, let me know. Leave a comment, give the video a like, and subscribe. Maybe we can all try to be a little more present together. The next few days were a quiet storm in my family's house. The kind of quiet that's louder than any argument. I stayed at my parents' place, sleeping in my old childhood bedroom. The wallpaper with the little race cars on it felt like it was mocking me, a reminder of a time when my biggest responsibility was tying my own shoes, and my grandma was the one who patiently taught me how. Breakfast the first morning was the worst. We all sat around the kitchen table. The smell of coffee and toast should have been comforting. It wasn't. My mom moved around the kitchen, her movements stiff. She wouldn't look at me. My dad read the newspaper, the rustle of the pages the only sound. My grandma was there, slowly stirring her oatmeal. She tried to break the silence. "The weather is supposed to be nice today," she said, her voice soft. No one answered. The clock on the wall ticked. I stared at my plate, my eggs getting cold. I could feel the weight of their disappointment. It was a physical thing, pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I wanted them to yell. I wanted a screaming match. Anything was better than this silent treatment. This was the consequence, and it was so much sharper than I ever imagined. Later, I found my mom alone in the laundry room folding towels. I stood in the doorway. "Mom, I didn't even know what to say. I'm sorry," felt like the most useless phrase in the English language. She didn't look up from the towel she was folding into a perfect square. "Do you have any idea what those hours were like for us, Kevin?" Her voice was low and steady, which was somehow worse than if she'd been shouting. We didn't know if she was hurt, if she'd fallen, if she was scared. We imagined the worst, all of it, and the whole time, we couldn't reach you. Your phone was dead. You were just gone. I leaned against the doorframe, my head hanging. "I know, I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't change what happened," she said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were full of a deep, tired sadness. "We rely on you, Kevin. You're an adult. We trust you. And you just dropped the ball. In the most important way." That was the core of it. The broken trust. It wasn't just about my grandma. It was about my role in the family. I was the one with the car, the good job, the plan. I was supposed to be the reliable one, and I had shown them I wasn't. I spent the afternoon with my grandma. We sat in the living room, watching some old game show on TV. I was on the floor, leaning against the sofa, just like I did when I was a kid. She had her knitting in her lap, but her hands were still. "You don't have to babysit me, Kevin," she said after a long while. "I'm not babysitting you," I said, my voice thick. I want to be here." She nodded slowly. We sat in silence for a few more minutes. Then she spoke, her eyes still on the TV. "You know, your grandfather," she began, and my chest tightened at the mention of him. He was always in a rush, too, a real go-getter. But he learned. There was one time. He was so focused on getting to a meeting, he forgot our anniversary. I was so mad. A small, wistful smile touched her lips. He came home with 3 dozen roses and the most ridiculous, oversized teddy bear you've ever seen. He said he'd rather be late for 100 meetings than ever make me feel like I wasn't his first priority again. She looked down at me. "People make mistakes, Kevin. Even the best people. The important thing is what you learn from it." Her forgiveness was a gift I knew I didn't deserve. It didn't fix the tension with my parents. It didn't erase the image of her on that security tape. But it was a start. It was a tiny flicker of light in all that heavy darkness. That night, my dad finally talked to me. He came into my room and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under his weight. "We need to talk about your phone," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I know. I'll get a new battery. A portable charger. It won't happen again." "It's not about the phone, son," he said, shaking his head. "It's about what the phone represents. Your distraction, your priorities." He sighed, a long, weary sound. "When I saw that footage, when I saw your mother's face, I was so angry with you, Kevin. I haven't been that angry in a long time." I just nodded, unable to speak. Hearing him say it out loud was like a punch to the gut. "But seeing how you've been these last few days, I see the remorse. I see it's eating you alive. And that's the point of this. Not to punish you forever, but to make sure you never, ever forget. Your grandmother is a treasure. Our time with her is limited. Every moment is a gift. You can't get those moments back once they're gone." He stood up and put a hand on my shoulder. It was the first time he'd touched me since that day at the police office. "Don't waste them staring at a screen." He left, closing the door softly behind him. I lay in the dark, his words echoing in my head. Don't waste them. I thought about the times I'd scrolled through my phone while she was telling me a story. All the times I'd said, "Just a second, Graham," while I finished sending a text. I had been wasting them for years. The airport was just the terrible, dramatic climax of a long pattern of neglect. A few days later, I drove my grandma back to her own apartment. It was just a short drive across town. This time, my phone was fully charged, and it stayed in my pocket the entire time. I carried her suitcase upstairs for her and made sure she was settled. At her door, she hugged me again. This one was different from the desperate hug in the airport medical office. This one was just a normal, loving grandma hug. But I held on a second longer. "I love you, Graham," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "I love you too, my sweet boy," she said, patting my cheek. "Now, you drive safe, and call me when you get home, so I know you're okay." I promised I would, and I did. It became a new rule for me. Every time I leave her, I call. It's a small thing, but it's a reminder. A promise I make to myself and to her. Life slowly went back to normal. I went back to my job, back to my own apartment. But I was different. The new Kevin, the one forged in the shame of O'Hare, was more present. I started leaving my phone in another room during dinner. I looked people in the eye when they talked to me. I became almost paranoid about being on time, about following through. But the ghost of that day is always with me. Every time my phone's battery dips below 50%, I feel a jolt of anxiety. I have a portable charger in my car, one in my backpack, one at my desk. It's not really about the phone anymore. It's about being reachable. It's about being responsible. And driving is the hardest part. Every time I pass a sign for O'Hare, my hands tighten on the wheel. My heart does a little stutter step. For a split second, I'm back there. I see the crowded curb. I feel the rush. I see her, standing there with her small suitcase, smiling bravely as I drove away from her. I don't think that feeling will ever go away, and maybe it shouldn't. Maybe that's the permanent consequence, a scar, a reminder etched into my nervous system to pay attention, to show up, to be there for the people who matter. Because the truth is, I got lucky. The story I'm telling you is one of a lesson learned, of a second chance. It's not a tragedy, but it so easily could have been. And that thought, that knowledge of how close I came to a loss that would have haunted me forever, that is the heaviest weight I carry. It's a weight I hope you never have to feel. So look up from your screen. Listen to the person in front of you. Hold the hug a second longer. You'll never regret it. If this story made you think, if it reminded you to cherish someone in your life, let me know. Leave a comment, give the video a like, and subscribe for more. Maybe we can all remember what's important together. The silence in my apartment was different now. It wasn't empty. It was full of ghosts. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would jump, not with excitement, but with fear. What if it was an emergency? What if someone needed me and I wasn't paying attention? I started noticing things I've never noticed before. The way my friend's voice would get quiet when I checked my phone during lunch. The disappointed look my mom would try to hide when I said I was too busy to visit. I had been living in a bubble, and my grandma at the airport was the pin that popped it. Work became a challenge. I'm a project manager. I'm supposed to be organized, on top of things. But now, every deadline felt like a life or death situation. My boss pulled me aside one day. "Kevin, you're doing great work, but you seem tense. Is everything okay?" I just nodded. How could I explain that I was trying to atone for a sin he knew nothing about? The worst was dating. I went out with Sarah, a woman I'd been seeing for a few weeks. We were at a nice restaurant. My phone was in my pocket, set to silent, but I could feel it. A phantom vibration. My eyes kept darting around the room. I wasn't listening to her. I was performing the act of listening. She reached across the table and put her hand on mine. "Kevin," she said softly, "you're a million miles away." And I was. I was at an airport curb, watching my grandma get smaller in the rearview mirror. I apologized, made up some excuse about work stress, but I saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes, the same doubt my family had, the doubt I had in myself. I started going to my grandma's every Sunday, not out of obligation, but out of a desperate need to prove I could be better. We'd sit in her cozy living room, with the floral sofa and the porcelain figurines. She'd make tea, and I'd actually drink it, not just hold the warm cup while staring at my phone. One Sunday, she brought out a big, dusty photo album. "I've been meaning to organize these," she said. We spent the entire afternoon going through them. Pictures of my grandfather, young and handsome, with a thick head of hair. Pictures of my mom as a little girl, with pigtails and a missing front tooth. Pictures of me as a baby, cradled in my grandma's arms. She told me stories I'd never heard, about how my grandfather proposed to her on a roller coaster because he was too nervous to do it on solid ground. About the time my mom, at 5 years old, tried to cut her own hair and gave herself a bald spot. I listened. I really listened. I laughed at the funny parts. I felt a pang of sadness for the grandfather I barely remembered. It was healing. Each story was a stitch, trying to close the wound I had created. But the scar was still there, thick and raised. I knew it would always be there. A month after the airport, I had to fly to New York for a work conference. The thought of going to O'Hare made me feel physically sick. The night before, I barely slept. I packed 3 portable chargers. I arrived at the airport a full 3 hours early. I was a nervous wreck. Walking through those automatic doors was like stepping back into my nightmare. The sounds, the smells, the hurried people, it all came rushing back. I saw an older woman sitting alone at a gate, and my breath caught in my throat. For a horrible second, I thought it was her. I texted my grandma from the gate. "At the airport, thinking of you. Love you." She texted back a heart emoji almost immediately. It was a small anchor in a sea of anxiety. The flight was fine. The conference was fine. But the whole trip, I felt like I was holding my breath. I couldn't relax. I was hyper-aware of my phone's battery level, of the time, of every person around me. I was so busy trying to prevent a disaster that I couldn't actually be present for the trip itself. On the flight back to Chicago, we hit some turbulence. The guy next to me gripped his armrests, his knuckles white. I just stared out the window at the clouds. My fear of flying was nothing compared to the fear of failing someone I loved again. The plane landed with a bump, and everyone clapped, relieved. I just felt tired. Driving home from the airport, I had to pass the exact terminal where I dropped her off. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. I slowed down, my eyes scanning the curb. It was crowded with people hugging, saying hello and goodbye. And for a moment, I saw her. Not a ghost, not a memory, but a real, living elderly woman with a small wheeled suitcase. She was standing by herself, looking a little lost, scanning the faces of the people in the cars. My foot instinctively moved from the gas to the brake. I was about to pull over. My heart was hammering against my ribs. What if she needed help? What if her grandson had left her there too? But then a car pulled up, right in front of her. A young man jumped out, all smiles, and enveloped her in a huge hug. He took her suitcase, put his arm around her, and led her to the passenger seat. He was present. He was there. I drove away, my face hot with a fresh wave of shame. The world was full of people being better than I had been. The lesson was everywhere I looked. When I got home, my apartment felt emptier than ever. The silence was back. I plugged my phone in, even though it was at 80%. I couldn't risk it. I sat on my couch and just breathed, in and out. I thought about the photo albums. I thought about my dad's hand on my shoulder. I thought about my grandma's unwavering smile. They had all given me a second chance. But the person who hadn't forgiven me was staring back at me in the mirror every morning. The new habits were becoming routine. The charged phone, the extra time, the eye contact. But the guilt wasn't fading. It had just settled in, becoming a permanent part of my landscape. A mountain I had to climb every single day. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me, that this was my life now. This was the price. This constant, humming awareness of my own capacity for failure. This was the consequence, and it was mine to carry forever. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's the one mistake you've made that you can't outrun? The one that plays in your head on a loop when you're trying to fall asleep. For me, it will always be an airport curb and a smiling, trusting face. It will always be the 4 hours I can never get back. The next few weeks were a strange kind of purgatory. I was going through the motions of my life, but I felt detached, like I was watching a movie of myself. My morning routine was the same: shower, coffee, drive to the office. But now, every action was measured. I checked my phone's battery percentage before I even got out of bed. I'd unplug it, see the 100% glowing on the screen, and feel a tiny, fleeting moment of relief. It was a pathetic little ritual, but it was mine. At work, my desk became a fortress against my own incompetence. I had a charger at my desk, one in my briefcase, and a massive power bank in my top drawer. My coworkers would joke about it. "Brooks, you planning for the apocalypse?" they'd say. I'd force a laugh, but inside, I was dead serious. My own personal apocalypse had already happened, and it started with a dead phone at a busy airport curb. I started making lists, not just work to-do lists, but life lists. Call Graham on Wednesday, visit my parents on Saturday, text Sarah back within an hour. I became a slave to these lists, terrified that if I deviated, the whole fragile structure of my new responsible life would collapse. I was so focused on not making the same mistake twice that I was making 100 new, smaller ones. I was so rigid, so anxious, that I was exhausting to be around. I could see it in people's eyes. They missed the old, easygoing Kevin, even if that guy was a bit of a flake. The Sunday visits with my grandma were my only real peace. Her apartment was a time capsule, smelling of lemon polish and sugar cookies. It was the one place where my new, hyper-vigilant self was welcomed without question. She never commented on the fact that I now placed my phone face down on her coffee table. She never mentioned the way I'd sometimes just stop and really look at her, memorizing the lines on her face. One Sunday, we were working on a jigsaw puzzle, a complicated one of a New England lighthouse. We'd been at it for over an hour, mostly in a comfortable silence, just the soft click of the cardboard pieces finding their home. "You know," she said, not looking up from the puzzle, "you can't spend the rest of your life trying to pay back a debt that only you think you owe." My hand, holding a blue sky piece, froze midair. I looked at her. She was studying the puzzle board with intense concentration. "I don't know what you mean," I lied. She finally glanced up, her eyes kind but knowing. "Kevin, I see you. You're trying so hard. You're like a soldier standing guard. But the war is over. I'm fine. We're all fine." Tears pricked at the back of my eyes. Hot and sudden. I looked down at the puzzle, the colors blurring. "It's not that simple, Graham." "Isn't it?" she asked softly. "I forgave you the moment I saw your face in that police office. Your parents, they've forgiven you too, even if they're still a little stiff about it. The only person who hasn't signed the peace treaty is you." She reached over and placed her hand, soft and warm and dotted with age spots, on top of mine. "You learned your lesson, my sweet boy. You learned it harder and faster than anyone should have to. Now you have to learn the next one. You have to learn how to forgive yourself. Otherwise, all this," she gestured vaguely at me, at my tense shoulders, my perpetually charged phone. "Otherwise, all this is just a different kind of prison." Her words settled deep inside me. Heavier than any guilt I'd been carrying. She was right. I had traded one distraction for another. I had swapped my phone for a ball and chain of my own making. I was so busy making sure I was present that I wasn't actually living. I was just going through a checklist of what a good, responsible person should do. I drove home that night with her words echoing in my head. A different kind of prison. I looked at the portable charger plugged into my car's console. I looked at the clock, calculating if I was on schedule. I was following all the rules, but I was miserable. I pulled into my parking spot and just sat there for a long time, the engine off, the night quiet around me. What was the point of all this vigilance if it was just making me a different, more anxious kind of absent? The goal wasn't to never make a mistake. The goal was to be better. And part of being better, I was starting to realize, was allowing myself to be human, to be flawed, to understand that I could be a good person who sometimes did a terrible thing, and that didn't have to define my entire existence. It was a terrifying thought. Letting go of the guilt felt like letting go of the steering wheel on a highway. The guilt had become my compass, my reminder. What would I be without it? Would I just slip back into my old, careless ways? I didn't have the answers. All I had was the memory of my grandma's hand on mine and the quiet, terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, she was right. Maybe the hardest part wasn't over. Maybe the hardest part was just beginning. The next morning felt different. The sun hit my window the same way. The coffee tasted the same. But something had shifted inside me. My grandma's words were a key, and they had unlocked a door I'd been too afraid to open. The door to forgiving myself. I went through my usual routine, but I tried to do it without the frantic energy. I looked at my phone. It was at 95%. I took a deep breath and I left it on the nightstand. I didn't bring a charger to the kitchen. It was a small act, but it felt huge. My hand felt empty without the phone. My mind kept screaming, What if? What if someone needs you? But I made my coffee, and I just stood there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I was just a guy in his kitchen making coffee, and the world didn't end. Driving to work. I didn't constantly check the battery. I didn't calculate my ETA down to the second. I just drove. When a song I liked came on the radio, I turned it up. I didn't think about the airport. I just listened to the music. For 3 whole minutes, I was just a person in a car listening to a song. It felt like a miracle. At the office, I saw the massive power bank in my drawer. I took it out. I held its heavy, blocky weight in my hand. This thing had been my security blanket, my punishment, my reminder. I walked it over to the IT department. "Hey, does anyone need a spare power bank?" I asked. A young intern's face lit up. "Seriously? Mine is junk." "It's all yours," I said, handing it over. I felt lighter walking back to my desk. I had disarmed one of my traps. The real test came that weekend. Sarah texted me, "Haven't heard from you in a bit. Everything okay?" My first instinct was to panic, to craft a long, detailed apology, to over-explain my silence. But I stopped. I heard my grandma's voice. "The war is over." I typed back, "Yeah, just working through some stuff. I'd love to see you if you're free. No phone, I promise." She wrote back a few minutes later, "I'd like that." We went for a walk in the park. I put my phone in my jacket pocket, and I zipped it shut. I didn't tell her I was doing it. I just did it. For the first hour, it was hard. My mind kept wandering to the pocket, to the little black rectangle of potential disaster. But then, I started actually listening to her. She was talking about her sister, about a problem at her work. I heard the nuance in her voice, the little laugh when something was ironic, the sigh when she was frustrated. I wasn't just waiting for my turn to talk. I was there, with her, in the park. At one point, she stopped walking and looked at me. "You're different today," she said. "Is it a bad different?" I asked, my heart thumping. "No," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "It's a good different. You're here." That word, here, it was everything. Later that night, I drove to my grandma's. I didn't call first. I just showed up with 2 pints of her favorite ice cream. She opened the door, surprised. "Kevin, what's the occasion?" "No occasion," I said, holding up the ice cream. "I just wanted to see you." We sat at her small kitchen table and ate ice cream straight from the containers. We didn't talk about the airport. We didn't talk about forgiveness. We talked about the weird neighbor who was trying to grow a giant pumpkin. We talked about the new bakery that opened downtown. We just talked, and I laughed. A real, deep, unforced laugh that came from my stomach. It was a sound I hadn't heard from myself in months. When I got ready to leave, I hugged her at the door. I held on a second longer than usual. "I love you, Graham," I said. "I love you too, Kevin," she whispered back. "Now go home, and for heaven's sake, stop worrying so much." The drive home took me past O'Hare. I saw the signs. I saw the distant glow of the terminal lights. My hands stayed loose on the wheel. My heart beat a steady, normal rhythm. I looked at the curb as I passed it. It was just a curb now. There were people there, living their own stories, making their own mistakes, finding their own ways home. It didn't belong to me anymore. I had given it back. I pulled into my parking spot and walked up to my apartment. The silence greeted me, but it was different tonight. It wasn't full of ghosts. It was just quiet, peaceful. I plugged my phone in. It was at 20%, and for the first time, I looked at that number, and I didn't feel a jolt of fear. I didn't see it as a countdown to failure. It was just a number, a piece of information. The phone would charge. I would sleep. Tomorrow would come. I am Kevin Brooks. I left my grandma at the airport. It was the worst thing I have ever done, but it wasn't the last thing I will ever be. I am also the guy who shows up for his grandma on a random weeknight with ice cream. I am the guy who can finally listen to his girlfriend. I am the guy who is learning, slowly and painfully, how to be a good person, not a perfect one. The scar is still there. I feel it sometimes, a tightness in my chest when I'm running late. But it's not a wound anymore. It's a reminder of a lesson I never want to forget, but also a reminder of the grace I was given, the grace to move on. My story is over, but my life is just getting started, and this time, I'm not going to miss it. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever carried a guilt that felt too heavy to put down, let me know. Leave a comment. Give this video a like if it meant something to you. And subscribe. Maybe our stories can help each other remember that we're all just human, trying our best, learning as we go.